What's happening, everybody? I'm Steve, and welcome back to Junkdrummer TV, where I give my initial reactions, my analysis, and my hot takes on the drummers of today and yesterday, and maybe tomorrow if I stick around that long. I am a gigging musician and a professional drum teacher, and I have been those two things for 20 plus years. This is episode 42, so let's go look for life, the universe, and everything, and go fishing for that old diamondback sturgeon, because we're going to be watching Tim Herb Alexander of Primus. Primus is one of those bands that I compare to the likes of Tom Petty and Johnny Cash. I know that sounds weird, but bear with me. Those two guys, Johnny Cash and Tom Petty, they hit that sweet spot where every genre of fan loves them. Heavy metal fans, punk fans, rock fans, hip-hop fans, they seem to all love Johnny Cash and Tom Petty. They transcend people's likes. And Primus is the same thing. I've heard this twice in my life. I've heard a heavy metal guy say, of course, man, I like funk music. I listen to Primus. And I've also heard a jam band fan say, yeah, man, I listen to heavy metal. I listen to Primus. That's a real fine needle that Primus has been able to thread over the years. They're loved by everyone. Now, when you're talking about Primus, it all starts with Les Claypool. It starts with Les Claypool and moves outwards, because Les Claypool is Primus, which leads to the styles of his bandmates. Larry Lalonde plays like an alien. You've never heard anyone play guitar like Larry Lalonde. He plays these really strange, angular, dissonant riffs, and then Tim Herb Alexander kind of plays like Neil Peart on acid, which would be the best way I could describe him. And they've both had to develop those very unique styles because they have to figure out a way to fit with Les Claypool. Les Claypool's bass playing includes bass, guitar, and drums. The way that he slaps and taps the bass, he does everything. Hell, he has a bass with a whammy bar on it. So anybody that's ever played with him, and he's been in other bands besides Primus, it's always interesting to see how drummers deal with playing with him. Les Claypool plays less bass. Like, not less bass, but, less bass. No other bass player on the planet plays like him. I call him the salamander of bass. And Tim Herb Alexander has one of the most unique drum chairs in all of rock and roll because he had to figure out, how do you play drums when your bass player is already playing drums? So a lot of times it almost feels like Tim Herb Alexander is playing like a secondary drum part to what Les is playing, and it's really, really interesting to watch and listen to. Now, before we get into it, I would like to remind everyone to check out my Patreon. I also have a PayPal option link in the description. Please like, comment, and share. Please give me a double tap on the subscription and the notification bell. And this episode goes out to T-Dog Gonzo 88, who's this commenter who's been on my ass for the last, 3 months to do Tim Herb Alexander. I told you I was going to do him, brother. You just got to be patient. So let's watch Tim Herb Alexander do a play-along with Jerry Was a Race Car Driver. Oh man, this song takes me back. I love Primus. I love Tim Herb. Okay, so right off the bat, there's something we can learn from Tim right now. If you notice what he's doing as a ride part on his hi-hat, he's playing a auxiliary hi-hat. He's putting a real big accent on the quarter note. He's going, a lot of times beginner drummers or intermediate drummers even, they haven't got to the point where they have that coordination to vary up the striking on their ride part or their hi-hat part. And there's so many different ways of how you can hit the hi-hat in your groove. Right here, he's given it a real quarter note feel. He wants the main part of the groove to have that but he's got that eighth, that small note in between there. Marching band drummers have no problem doing that because that's something you do a lot in marching band. So yeah, man, listen to what Larry Lalonde's playing. How do you get up in the morning and be like, this is the guitar part I'm going to play? He has to do that because he has to find his space with Les doing all the things. Really smooth, no tension at all in his playing. Good posture. All the things you want. If you start out with those things, playing well becomes easier. Here's that Zill bell that he was known for endorsing with Zildjian. Right there, great composition. First verse was, pretty much that constant, 2-measure groove that he's playing there. He's playing some double bass in there. But if you notice the second chorus he came in, or the second verse, he put this little hi-hat tom snare drum thing in there just to variate it from the first, I don't know if that's a word, from the first verse. That's very Neil Peart-like playing. We're talking about him a lot lately. Very atypical drum setup. I use that so much. I do those 2 30-second notes with 1 foot. Definitely rip that off. I love his China cymbal. It's got big chunks out of it. That's how I like my China cymbals. I've never understood getting really nice, expensive China cymbals because they're not supposed to be nice. They're supposed to be trash. Like Wuhan's are probably some of the best sounding and they're super cheap. I use a B8 Pro China and I use it until it breaks, and then I use it more, and I use it until it breaks to the point where it don't resonate. This is what I like out of my China. I want it to be as trashy as hell. Still doing that quarter note accent on his groove. I think isn't that sample from Texas Chainsaw Massacre? So again, Larry Lalonde just playing like how do you even decide to play guitar like that? It's such a strange drum chair. If you play with like a traditional bass player, like a Pino Palladino type or a Lee Sklar type, if the bass player's really good, the drum parts just write themselves. But I can't stress enough, like if you sit down behind a drum set and then Les Claypool starts playing, he's playing all the shit. He's playing all of it. He's playing all the rhythm, and you gotta find a way to get in where you fit in, and it's a really strange beast to do. It's very interesting to compare the way that he played with Les than how Brain played with him. Brain took a completely different approach. He played like he was playing basically with George Clinton. He just played stripped down funk parts and just didn't even try to get into all that space with Les. He just let him play. Tim Herb plays more in it with Les. He has more chops, more proggy type stuff. And his way of playing in Primus was, it's my favorite just because I grew up, like Sailing the Sea of Cheese and Pork Soda's two of my all-time favorite records. I like the Brown album too, but the way that he played with Les, it was like he wasn't scared to get in and fucking play tennis with Les. Primus is Les Claypool. Played Tama forever. Always had that gong drum back there. We love bald drummers around here. Now this is the third time he does the verse. If you notice, they put more variation right there. Very Rush. Like Primus toured with Rush. It's like if Rush were American and just did DMT all the time, this is what they would have sounded like. That drum fill that he did right there. I love using the bass drum as a big part of your drum fill. When I play drum fills, I go from my bass drum feeling like it's the groove a component. And when I go to play a drum fill, I usually play one up and two down. I think I have, 4 toms at my disposal, and I use the bass drum like that. It's a good example of that drum fill right there. Yeah, man. 1995 Steve was in love with Primus, and I still am. I still listen to them every once in a while. But yeah, man, I think that's the coolest thing about Primus is I assure you that there was not a record company whenever they started. I don't remember what their first records were, like late 80s, really early 90s. I assure you there was not an A&R guy sitting behind a big oak desk in Hollywood saying or Los Angeles and be like, bring me a band that sounds like Primus. That's how we'll make the money. Primus was able to blaze their own trail based on their quirky awesomeness, and of course around the cult of personality that is Les Claypool. I love bands that skirt the traditions, and this band, they didn't even acknowledge tradition. It's one of the reasons I love them. And again, they're loved by every genre fan. Like country fans like Primus, hip-hop fans like Primus. I love that story of again, the heavy metal guy said man, I like funk music, I listen to Primus, and some stone jam band fan was like, yeah, I listen to metal, I listen to Primus. They were all things to all people, and that's, man, as an artist, that's a real hard place to live, and they did it quite well. And to have a career as long as they have, they should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Primus should definitely be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They've been around long enough. They definitely should. They deserve it because they're fucking amazing. I never got to see them. I saw the Flying Frog Brigade, which was cool too, but it wasn't Tim and Larry. So, man, I'm glad I got to do this video. I've been waiting to do this for a while because I was going to have some fun with it. So, always things you can learn from Tim Herb Alexander. The big thing is, if you ever are getting into that band situation where someone plays very non-traditional and plays things that you've never heard before, and if you ever get to have that experience, it's amazing. I actually got to have that experience in the last band that I was in. You get a chance to kind of invent a way to play, because again, Les does all the things. You had to figure out a way to fit in with all of the things that he was playing, and Tim Herb always did it well. So if you enjoyed all that, please give me a like, comment, and share. Give me a double tap on the subscription and the notification bell. Please check out my Patreon. Maybe hit up my PayPal if you're feeling it today. And remember, keep practicing until it's easy.